Hey y'all, my name is Merritt. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my September wrap up as a tier rank. Now, there are going to be timestamps in the description below for you to skip ahead to whatever sections interest you the most, because this is going to be a really long video and there's honestly no way around it. So if you don't want to hear me talk for however long this video is, I completely understand. I don't want to hear myself talk for however long this video is. Go ahead and check the description and skip to what interests you the most. Now, as far as a breakdown of how this video is going to work, I'm first going to talk about what I'm currently reading, then I'm going to move into the statistics portion of this video, as well as talked about what I DNF'd. Then I will move on to books that I want to specifically highlight in this video. So that's going to be my top 3 books that I read this month, because I feel like the tier rank format, while it's fun, it doesn't allow me to talk at length about the books that I truly loved. And so let me know in the comments below if you guys would prefer me to do a conventional wrap up or if you'd prefer me to continue and do the tier ranks. And then after I do that, we'll launch into my actual tier rank. So first, what I'm currently reading. I am currently reading 3 different books, the first of which is Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I'm reading this for the Percy Jackson read-along that I'm co-hosting, and I am about 45% through, so I'm almost halfway. So if you don't know what Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief is about, it is about a young boy named Percy Jackson who discovers that he's half human, half god, and basically everything that follows with that. It's a super fun middle grade fantasy series, and I'm really adoring my time reading it and being back with Percy and his friends. So I'm trying to stretch this out. Actually, I was planning on just reading it in September, but I have a terrible memory, so I wanted to make sure that I remembered stuff for the live show near the middle of October, so I'm planning to continue reading about 25% a week. Then I'm also reading A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and this is actually a reread for me. I'm listening to it on audio because I kind of just wanted another audiobook to listen to. I think that it's better quality than I specifically remember it being, and the elements of it being a Beauty and Beast retelling are very much evident to me this time around, whereas when I first read it, I was kind of like, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I couldn't tell. So I am enjoying it, but knowing what happens in the rest of the series just really irritates me reading it. And if you know, you know, but I can't really go into that territory without launching into spoilers. So what A Court of Thorns and Roses is about is a young girl named Feyre who kills a fairy, and as punishment, she is sent to the land of fairy to live with one of the high court fairies. I just said the word fairy a lot, but basically that's what A Court of Thorns and Roses is. Fairies everywhere. Next, I'm currently reading Jade City, and this is a buddy read for the Shelf Space Discord, and I'm only about 60 pages in, so I don't really have a very good idea of what this book is about or my thoughts and feelings on it yet, but I am enjoying it so far, but it is a little bit confusing just because of how many characters there are, and there's not a glossary, and this is an adult fantasy, so I am a little bit confused by what specific elements are in the story, but I'm gradually picking it up through context clues. So far I am really liking this, and I think that I am going to enjoy it as a whole. So now we're going to move on to the statistics portion of this video. I read 27 books and I ended up reading 8,754 pages with an average of 324 pages per book. As for how many books I actually completed on my TBR, I completed 11 of the 14 books that I set out to read. As far as breaking down the genre, I read 4 thrillers, 4 fantasy, 8 contemporary, 1 historical fiction, 3 nonfiction, 6 graphic novels, and 1 classic. And then as far as the age range, I read 10 YA, 3 new adult, 4 middle grade, and 7 adult. Breaking it down by format, I read 4 ebooks, 16 physical books, 6 audiobooks, and 1 combination of an audiobook with a physical book. And now going more in depth about the DNFs that I had, I DNF'd A Million Junes because it just really wasn't my thing. I tried to read this for my reading books that made people cry vlog, and if you want to know more of my thoughts as to why I DNF'd it, it's in that video. But basically, I just couldn't connect to the main character who was a high schooler, and I just didn't want to force myself to read that because I just wasn't enjoying it. I also DNF'd the Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater, which might be a hot take, I know, but personally, I just don't think that this series is for me. I did like the first book, but it wasn't my favorite thing of all time, and when I was reading the Dream Thieves, I found myself not really remembering much that happened in the Raven Boys and not really caring about what happened in the Raven Boys, so I've decided to stop that series for now. Maybe I'll return to it in the future, but honestly, there's so many other books that I want to read, so I doubt it. Okay, so now I want to highlight 3 books specifically that I adored this month. So first of all, I have to shout out Loveless by Alice Oseman. I actually did a live stream with the Page Turner Book Club, which is on my channel actually. So if you've read this book and you want to hear our spoilery thoughts, I will link that in the description. Basically what Loveless is about is a girl named Georgia who is going to university for the first time, and she's basically coming to terms with her own sexuality. And this book was adorable. It was heartbreaking. It was funny. It was literally everything under the sun, and I couldn't have asked for a better written book because oh my gosh, was it amazing. Like, I have so many tabs in this book. Like, it is absolutely absurd. I don't think I've ever tabbed a book so much in my life, but I truly felt connected to every single one of these characters in this book, and I really feel like I found a piece of myself in each different character. So while I never truly resonated with one specific person, I felt that there was something that I could take away from each individual character, which is just so rare. And also, I loved how this book took place in a college setting because that's where I'm at in my life, and I feel like I never read about that in YA. I think that I would categorize this more as new adult because of the college setting, but where are all the books about college students in contemporary? Because I felt so seen by this book, and not even from like a representation standpoint. I just felt seen by the actions of these characters and their jokes, and it was just amazing. If you have not read Loveless, definitely go check it out. I also did leave some Own Voices reviews of this book because it does follow an asexual, aromantic teen in the Loveless livestream. So if you are interested in seeing what Own Voices reviewers are saying, definitely go check those out as well. There were a lot of positive responses as well as a lot of negative responses to this book, and I can't speak on that experience, but I really adored this book and everything that happened in it. I just loved all these characters, and it's definitely one that I'm going to be rereading in the near future. Next, I gotta hype up my man, Frederick Bachman with Anxious People, because oh my gosh, this might be better than Beartown. Like, I don't want to make any assumptions, but like the amount of emotions and the range of emotions that I had reading this book was just absolutely absurd. If you don't know what Anxious People is about, it basically follows the story of a bank robber after they rob a bank, and coincidentally, they end up at an apartment viewing and they hold 7 people hostage. At least I think it's 7. I can't count. I'm not very good at math. It basically follows the bank robber story as well as all of the different hostages, and I just felt so many things reading this. The themes in this book were immaculate. Like, I'm not even kidding you. There were themes of parenthood. There were themes of family and found family. There was such a hopeful yet desolate tone to this book, and I was crying the entire time reading it. I was laughing the entire time reading this. I really can't say enough praise for this book. Besides that, I think that you need to go read this book. There are a lot of trigger warnings. I always have a link in the description box where you can search whatever book that you're interested in reading, and you can see the available trigger warnings. So go check that out. Go look at that site, see if this book is a good fit for you, because it made me feel every single emotion under the sun. Thinking about it, like, I'm just gonna cry. Like, I had to take crying breaks while reading this book because it was so amazing. I think what I loved most about this book is that I really took away something from it, and it's the fact that just because you think you might know someone doesn't mean that you do. Like, you don't know what's going on in someone's life, and you cannot assume what's going on in a stranger's life. And so to be in the heads of these different people that come from so many different backgrounds and that are so different from me and the other characters in the book, and really seeing how they react to this hostage situation and just how they live their lives in general was just astounding, because I found myself caring so deeply for them and really looking back at my own perception and judgment and thinking, wow, I really don't know what goes on in everyone's life. Like, I really should be more empathetic towards strangers and be more kind towards strangers. Not because I'm totally rude to strangers, but because it really made me step back and acknowledge that I don't know what the heck's going on in everyone's life. So I should be trying my best to be a better human every day and be kind to everyone every day. So long story short, I loved this book. You need to go read it. It is fantastic, and I cannot recommend Frederick Bachman enough. Every single book that I've read by him has been an absolute hit, and I cannot wait to get through the rest of his backlist. The last book that I want to highlight before I move into the tier rank portion of this video is Where Dreams Descend. It is so magical. Like, I don't know how to explain this. I was really confused reading it, but also I was just straight up vibing. I was having the best time reading this book because it is so atmospheric and magical, and I really felt connected to these characters, and I loved it. I've never seen Phantom of the Opera before, and I've heard that this is like a Phantom of the Opera retelling, so that just goes to show you how amazing this book is. What I will say about Where Dreams Descend is that I don't think that this book is going to be for everyone. The world building is very different. It's very much show, don't tell. And so you're kind of confused as to what the magic does and what the magic system is. And the world building is very much the same way. You aren't really given a whole lot of information. And so I think that this could be really frustrating for some readers, but personally, I loved it because it made my imagination go so many different places and really feeling like I could give the magic system character, if that makes sense. Obviously, this is heavily dependent on the second and final book in the series, but I think that this series has the potential to be one of my new YA favorite fantasy series. And it is just because of the atmosphere, like, oh, chills. I don't even know what to say about it. I think that if you like any of the following YA series, you would really eat this book up. Throne of Glass, Strange the Dreamer, Ace of Shades. I feel like it is a perfect combination between the three of those because our main character is kind of like Selena, but in my opinion, she's much more readable because Selena frustrated the heck out of me when I read those books. But the main character in Where Dreams Descend is so much more charismatic. I don't even think I gave a summary of what this book is about, and honestly, I don't know if I could tell you, but go into this book blind, be expected to be taken away. It is the perfect mix between like Strange the Dreamer's flowery writing and The Greatest Showman, and I adore it. I adore it. I'm going to stop talking about it now, otherwise this video is going to turn into a cinematic film. All right, so those were the 3 books that I wanted to highlight specifically that I read this month, and now let's get into the official tier rank. So looking at the categories, it is the exact same as my last month's tier rank. I do a new favorite category, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically going to be the 3 books that I just talked about. Then I have a good category, which is going to be basically a 3.5 to 5-star book. That is not a new favorite for me because personally, I think that I can give a book 5 stars and it not be very memorable for me. That's just because I think that there's sometimes really perfect books that maybe aren't going to stick with me the rest of my life, but I wouldn't give them anything else than a 5-star because there's nothing I would change about it. So that's why the good category can include a 5-star book. Then I have average, which is going to be a 2.5 to a 3.5 star book typically. These are books that just really didn't do it for me. They were okay, they weren't necessarily bad, but they didn't blow me away either. Then I have the yikes category, which is going to be a 2.5 star or below. Then Wish It Was Never Written is going to be reserved for the worst of the worst 1-star books. And lastly, there's going to be a category for did not rate / you'll find out later. I don't think that I have any books in this list that you'll find out later my thoughts and feelings on because I'm not currently filming any reading vlogs. So without further ado, let's just get into the actual tier rank. So the first 2 books that I read were for my reading books that made people cry video. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. It was a really fun time, but I read The Nightingale and The Miseducation of Cameron Post for that. I think I'm going to put The Nightingale in the good category. I ended up giving this one, I believe, 4 stars, and it was a pretty good read. It did actually make me cry, spoiler alert, but it's not a new all-time favorite for me. If you don't know what this book is about, it follows 2 sisters during World War II and just basically how they react to the world that they're living in and what they do about it. I felt really connected to one of the characters in this book, and the other sister was just kind of average for me. I really cared about one storyline over the other, which is, I guess, the biggest negative about this book, but I still think that if you are a historical fiction reader that you should pick up The Nightingale because you'll probably adore it a lot more than I did. Okay, so the second book that I read for that video was The Miseducation of Cameron Post. I ended up giving this one 2 stars. If you don't know what The Miseducation of Cameron Post is about, it follows a young teenager named Cameron, and basically her parents die in a car accident, and she is almost a little bit relieved because she realizes she doesn't have to tell her parents that she's gay. And so she moves in with her grandma and her aunt, and when they find out that she's gay, she gets sent to conversion therapy. So this is a very heavy read, and I think that it is going to be a really impactful read for a lot of people. But personally, I did not like the writing style. I think that the execution was very, very poor because the paragraphs were literally taking up pages, and I did not connect to the writing style one bit, so I wasn't really inclined to connect to the characters. So I'm gonna put this one an average because I think that it will do a lot for other people, but it just did not do it for me. Next are the 3 books that I read for the Reading Books with Similar cover reading vlog that I did. If you haven't watched that video yet, click off this one, go watch that one instead, because in my opinion, it's so much more fun. I really enjoyed my time making this vlog and coming up with this idea, but I did not have a good time reading these actual books because they were all terrible. I gave Before We Met, I believe, 2 stars. I'm gonna put all of these in, well, not all of them. I'm gonna put Before We Met and Perfect in the yikes category because those were both 2-star reads for me. And then I'm going to put Charlie Presumed Dead in Wish It Was Never Written because, oh my God, was it terrible. Before We Met is a psychological thriller, and it wasn't the worst book that I've ever read, but it was not good. It had a lot of gaslighting women and just elements in a story that I really don't like. Like, for instance, the main character was really inquisitive and trying to figure out all these things that her husband did, but she couldn't see the biggest plot twist coming, which was so obvious that I predicted it from like page 40. So I don't like it when a main character in a thriller is super inquisitive and asking all these questions, but then they just do dumb stuff. Like, there's nothing more frustrating to read about in a book. Before We Met follows a woman named Tana whose husband doesn't return her calls after a business trip, so she starts to fear that he's missing. He later calls her back and basically explains the situation to her, and something just sounds wrong to her, so she starts investigating and seeing what he's actually up to, and she realizes he's been lying to her about a lot of things. So it follows her investigation of that and just exploring who her husband actually is, and it was just bad. I can't recommend it. I can't recommend any of these books that I read for this reading vlog, and again, if you want specifics, go watch that video instead because it can be a lot more articulate than I can be now because it's not as fresh in my mind. Then I read Perfect, which I can't even begin to explain to you guys what it's about because I honestly have no idea. I felt like that book was a fever dream, and I was so confused because of how bizarre it was. It follows a young boy named Byron who is with his family, and his family one day is driving down this road and his mom hits a young girl in a bicycle and basically doesn't remember that she does that, and Byron's just like, Mom, what the heck, like, you hit this kid on a bicycle, why aren't you stopping? And no one believes Byron. It's kind of magical realism. It's just really weird, and again, a book that I can't really recommend because I didn't understand what was going on. I was super confused the entire time. I ended up having to listen to this one partly on audiobook just so that I could get through it because I really disliked it. What I will say about Perfect is that it was probably the best book that I read for that reading vlog objectively. It had the best writing, but again, 2 stars, wasn't good. And then we have Charlie Presumed Dead, which was a treat. Charlie Presumed Dead follows a young boy named Charlie who is dead, and at his funeral, there are 2 girls that meet and realize that they were both dating Charlie. So Charlie had 2 girlfriends, and it follows basically these 2 girls thinking that Charlie's not actually dead. They think that he faked his death, and so they go on a worldwide mission to uncover where he actually is and what his plan is. And it's really interesting. That's about all I can say about this book, and I wish that I had never read it, and I wish that it was never written because it had nothing good in it. Like, it had no good elements, nothing positive except for the fact that it was fun to read in a bad way. Then I have the 3 books that I read for my Reading Like a Kardashian video, which was also a lot of fun. Go check that out if you haven't. I really had a fun time reading these books and living my best Kardashian Jenner life because I do not live like a Kardashian. I wish that I could, but I am too broke to. So instead of living like a Kardashian, I decided to read like one. And the first book that I read for that reading vlog was Pretty Little Liars, which I gave 3 stars. I'm going to put that in the average category because that's how I feel about it. It was an average book, and there's not much else to say about it. It's a little bit problematic, but it's also really fun. It follows these 4 girls who are in high school that are all connected by their friend that disappeared when they were in 7th grade. And so when each of these 4 girls start getting text from a mysterious person named A, they start to think that it might be their friend Allison who went missing all those years ago. Like I said, it was fun, but it was a little bit problematic. There were a lot of elements in that story that I forgot were in there and were kind of cringeworthy, so. The next book that I read for that reading vlog was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, which I did not rate because it is a nonfiction, and I typically don't rate nonfiction. If I were to rate it, I would give it 3 stars. I feel like I learned some things from it, but I didn't learn a whole lot. It is a nonfiction book about organizing your life and decluttering your home, and there were some really strong points in there, but I also felt like the overall tone was a bit judgmental at times. and I didn't love that aspect of the book. Then I read The House Guest, which I don't know where I should put this because I gave it a 2.5. Well, okay, I gave it a 2.5, which is an average rating, so I'm gonna put it in the average category. But I did not understand this book. I had no idea what was happening within it. It is a short story horror collection, but I didn't find that the stories were horrifying at all. I didn't really see the cohesion between all of these different stories and the reason to put them all in a collection together, but I just don't get it. I don't know if that's me being dumb or if it's just the way the book was written. Like, is it actually a bad book or do I just not understand it? It's kind of a tricky one to rate and to rank, but I think I'm gonna just keep it in the average category because it wasn't bad. I think that a lot of people could read this and really enjoy it and gain something from it, but for me, I was just clueless. Now moving on to my nonfiction reads, I read Hood Feminism, which again, I will put in the did not rate category because it's nonfiction, I didn't rate it. But I really feel like I learned something from this, and I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by the author, so I highly recommend it if you are looking for a shorter audiobook. I believe it is 6 or 7 hours long. This book was really insightful and informative, and I really wish that I had a physical copy because I could have annotated it, and I feel like I would have gained even more that way. I did really like listening to the audiobook, but this is one that I really wish that I physically owned because it does have a lot of really great information. So if you're looking for any feminist books, I highly recommend it. Next, we have All Boys Aren't Blue, which again is a nonfiction book. It's a memoir about George Johnson, who is Black and queer and living in America, and it basically tells their story throughout their life, and I really enjoyed this one as well. I feel like I gained a lot out of it. It is another short audiobook. I believe it's only 5 hours long, so again, if you're looking for a short audiobook recommendation, highly encourage you to pick up this one because I feel like I gained a lot out of it. I really want to re-listen to this. Actually, it's narrated by George Johnson as well, but super informative, super devastating because George Johnson does not shy away from everything that's happened in their life. And I think that is so important because this book is catered towards young adult readers, which is very rare. I feel like I've never heard about a memoir or a nonfiction book that is specifically catered towards young adults. So just the fact that that is what the purpose of this book is super special, and I think that you should definitely pick it up if you are interested in learning more about the Black queer experience in America. Next is a book that I'm not going to go too much into. It was only like 50 pages long. It's actually a play, and that is RUR, which is, I believe, Rossum's Universal Robots or something like that. I read it for school. It's for my Frankenstein science fiction class. I didn't hate it. I actually think this is probably a 3-star book, but again, it's a play and it's only like 50 pages, so can I really, fairly judge that? It was a book, and I read it, so I included it because I want to feel accomplished and say that I read 27 books, not 26 books, so. Moving on to my next category or section of this video, I'm going to be talking about all the graphic novels that I read during this month, and I actually read 6 of them, which I feel like is a lot for me, and it makes me feel like I'm reading more than I actually am, which is what I love about them. But the first 2 that I read were the Tea Dragon Society and the Tea Dragon Festival. These are both really cute. I'm going to put these in the good category for sure. I really liked the first one, the Tea Dragon Society, but I think that the Tea Dragon Festival is where this book series really shines. It is so inclusive, so diverse. I loved how the author included sign language in the second book because I have never seen that represented in a graphic novel. I think I've only actually read 1 or 2 books in my entire life that have the reference of sign language in it. And I learned sign language in high school. I don't use it very often now, but I definitely want to rebrush up on my skills. I really liked seeing that piece in here because I feel like it's something that is not often included in literature. Next is an ARC I got. I believe it's pronounced Pistuvi, but I might be incorrect. I am gonna say I wish it was never written. I gave it a 1.5 star, and I feel really aggressive putting that on here because it is an ARC, but I really did not enjoy this. It was super confusing. I honestly couldn't tell you what actually happened in this graphic novel because I don't know. I really don't know what happened. There was no plot, it was extremely confusing, and it jumped from scene to scene without any explanation of what was going on in each scene, and I really can't recommend this one to you guys. I am very thankful that the publisher and NetGalley provided me with this ARC, but I did not enjoy it. Then I read Check Please Volume 1 and Volume 2, and I'm going to put these in the good category. These are so close to being a new favorite though. I ended up giving them both 4 stars because the first one just wasn't as strong as I wanted it to be, and the second volume I really wanted to 5-star, and I thought that I was going to 5-star it until the last like 20 pages or so because I did not like how the volume ultimately concluded, and I know that might be a hot take. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. But I just feel like the ending was super, super rushed, and I didn't really see how we got to that point in this dynamic. I can't really go into it without talking about spoilers, but it is a really cute graphic novel series, and I highly, highly recommend it. It follows a hockey player named Biddy as he goes to college, so it follows him throughout all 4 years, which is again something I really, really love seeing, as that is my experience right now. And I really feel like he grew as a character. Biddy plays hockey, he loves to bake, and he also has his own YouTube channel, so it was really, really easy to connect with him as a character. He was super, super adorable, and I loved all the friendships in here. I loved learning about hockey a little bit. I thought that was super fun as someone who doesn't really know much about sports. So again, if you're looking for a really great graphic novel series with beautiful art, go check out Check Please, because it is super, super cute. I think that you will definitely enjoy it if you liked Heartstopper or Bloom, because it kind of combines those two themes. Like Bloom has the theme of baking in it, and then Heartstopper is just super cute and inclusive, similar to how Check Please is. Next is another arc that I got, and that is Odessa. I'm going to put this in the average category because I gave it a 2.5. I think that this book is probably the epitome of average for me, because I did enjoy some aspects while reading it, but I also didn't like a lot of aspects while reading it. I think that the art style is absolutely stunning. It is all pink, black, and white, and I love the color pink, so just pages and pages of it really, really contributed to my enjoyment of the story, and I feel like it was perfect for the tone of the book. This graphic novel is set in a dystopian world, and that was my biggest problem with it, because if you're going to have this dystopian setting, you need to really characterize it and build that world, and I felt like that was the biggest element that was lacking in this book. I really enjoyed seeing certain scenes with the dystopian worlds, and I felt like that was a great way to build that world in a graphic novel, but when there were a lot of really like info dump scenes, I was really jarred, I guess is the best way to explain it. Another thing that I wish that this book had was a heavier focus on family themes. I think that this book was trying to do a lot with the concept of family and what that means for these characters in this book, but it was never really followed through on, and I don't really see myself continuing the rest of the series because this is going to be a series, and so knowing that there wasn't really an ultimate conclusion within that theme was kind of upsetting. I forgot to mention this with Pistuvi, but both of these books actually come out on the 10th of November. Next, we already talked about this book, so I'm just going to go ahead and put it in my new favorite category, and that is Where Dreams Descend. I'm gonna go ahead and put Anxious People as well as Loveless up there as well. Now I'm going to talk about all the YA books that I read this month. So Spiritbound and Last Sacrifice, I'm going to go ahead and group together as well. These are the last two installments in the Vampire Academy series, and I'm going to put them in the good category because I really enjoyed my time reading this series, and I feel like the conclusion was great for what the series was. I genuinely was surprised by a lot of the stuff that happened in the last book, and I have not read this series for years and years, so of course I was going to forget things, but I didn't remember the biggest plot twist, and it had me shook. I was really, really shocked by that. And I can't really say much about these last two books without going into spoilers for the entire series. So if you want to know what Vampire Academy is about, it follows a young girl named Rose, who is a Dhampir, which is basically a vampire warrior who protects this elite class of vampires. And she and her best friend are at this academy and vampires, and it's basically like your prime YA vampire book series, and I love that. I love that for me. I love that I read these because it was a super fun time, and the audiobooks were pretty good. Next, I read Majesty, which I'm going to put in the new favorite category as well. I don't want to go into too much detail like I did with the other three books that I talked about at the beginning of this video, because I feel like I've talked about American Royals enough on my channel. You're probably sick of me. I just absolutely adore this duology, and I think that they're so much fun. If you don't know what American Royals is about and you're somehow subscribed to my channel, it basically follows 4 girls who are in this dystopian American society where instead of George Washington becoming president, he actually became a monarch. So it follows the descendants of George Washington as well as 2 of their friends. And it's lots of drama, lots of relationships build, and it's just a really fun time. I thought Majesty was a really great conclusion to the series, and I had just as much fun reading it as I did American Royal. So obviously I gave that one 5 stars as well. For my last YA book, I want to talk about Grown by Tiffany Jackson, and I'm going to put this one in the good category. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really, really liked it. I thought that the themes were super important, and it's not talked about enough in YA, but I was really jarred by Tiffany Jackson's writing style, and I've never read a book by her before, so I don't know if this is typical of all of her books, but I just really found that the pacing was not something that I was enjoying because I felt like I couldn't put the book down, but not in a good way. Like, I was glued to reading it because I was so terrified of everything that was gonna happen, and I just needed to know what was gonna happen next, which is a good thing typically in books because this book really read more like a thriller, but I was ultimately not satisfied with the conclusion because I feel like we needed a few more pages, and I was kind of confused by what happened in the end. I had to reread that page like 2 or 3 times to fully grasp the actual conclusion of the story. So the ending was kind of a letdown for me, but overall my enjoyment of the book was pretty strong. Grown is about a young girl named Enchanted who wants to be a pop singer, and when she has an opportunity to go on tour with someone she really idolizes, she goes with them, and it does have a lot of heavy trigger warnings, so again, use that website that I linked down below to see what specifically this book is about. But it was very devastating, it was very heart-wrenching, but overall I think that the writing style just wasn't for me, and that's okay. I do really want to read another book by Tiffany Jackson because I don't know if this one particularly wasn't just for me. Not that it wasn't for me because I still rated it pretty high, but I wonder if another book by her might be a better fit. I think that's also just related to the point of what the book is about. I wasn't really interested in the singing side of things as well. I was more invested in the actual relationship between Enchanted and the other main character. Next is a middle grade that I read as an ARC, which was called Thanks a Lot Universe, and I gave this one a 3.75, so this one is going into the good category as well. I really enjoyed this one, and I think that if you are a middle grade contemporary reader, you are going to love this. I think that my enjoyment of the book is not going to be the same as most people who read this book, so that's why I'm going to still highly recommend this one to y'all. Even though it's not a new personal favorite for me, I think this will be a new favorite for a lot of people. This book follows 2 young boys, Brian and Ezra, and they're really struggling with different things. Ezra is kind of struggling with his sexuality, and Brian is struggling with a lot of things at home. And this book, I feel like, is going to make a lot of children feel seen because there's a lot of representation that I haven't seen before in books, especially middle grade. So I am so excited for this book to be published. This book comes out May 11th of next year. We're on my last 2 books. First of all, The Night Swim. This book is a thriller, but it has so much social commentary in it that it overpowers the actual thriller itself. I'm all for social commentary in books. I think that it is really important and that we should be having these discussions. However, if this is a thriller, you should be focusing on those elements first, because I feel like the social commentary in this book really overpowered the thriller elements, and so I thought that the mystery was just kind of pushed to the side and it was more focused on the social commentary. And I can't really talk too much about that without getting into spoiler territory. I think that there's certain readers that will really enjoy this book, so I still will recommend it to y'all, but personally, not a new favorite. I gave it 2 stars. Same with The Rage of Dragons. This one's not relating to social commentary, but it is a very disappointing read for me. I gave this one 2 stars as well. I read this for the Shelf Space Book Club, which is run by Jessie May, and this was a very divisive book. People either loved it or really disliked it, and I'm actually going to link Alan from the Library of Alexandria's video down below where he goes in depth on The Rage of Dragons and the positives and the negatives of it. I think that his review is really well crafted, so I'm going to lead you there for more conclusive thoughts if you are interested in reading this book. But personally, I did not connect with the main character Tao in this book, and the world building was super confusing for me. I had to constantly refer to the glossary every other page, and that's fine for me, but I was looking at the glossary trying to connect the terms and I still didn't understand it, so this book was just not written for me, and that's okay. I think that you could still really enjoy this book because, again, this was very divisive within the book club, so if this is one that interests you, still definitely give it a chance. And we did it. We have tier ranked all 27 of these books. I am so tired of talking. I need water desperately, but I want to say thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. If you're interested in following me on any of my other social medias, I always have that link down below. I have a Twitter and an Instagram as well as a YouTube channel, and I would love to connect with you there. Until then, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.